hoping that that right ankle improves very, very quickly indeed. Oh, a lovely third goal for India. Abhishek has a smile on his face.
Junior World Cup recently, Germany beaten final hurdle, England finishing in third. As France have scored, beautifully worked up the right flank, and they've come from behind to lead. The 99th tonight, so 69th, Sika Argentina. Hankunas and 3-0 right at the start of the fourth quarter. Argentina really pulling clear now.
Welcome to the FIH Pro League show with me, Sarah Juggins. I'm joined today by South African superstar Marsha Cox, well-known coach and coach educator Coach Pholo, better known to all as Coach Pholo, and John Wyatt, former GB and England international and now Director of Sport at FIH. So it's an afternoon now. Good afternoon to you all. Hi, Marsha.
Hi, guys. Lovely to be here again.
Hi, Coach Pholo.
Hello, guys.
And hi, John.
Sarah, hi, everyone.
Brilliant. We have had a busy weekend of hockey in the FIH Pro League. But first, I just wanted really to touch base with all of you on the recent Women's Junior World Cup. We've had the Junior World Cup show, but I think with a week of reflection, I can now come back to you and ask each of you what your overriding impressions were of that event. And I'm going to come to Coach Pholo first because, you were there. You watched every single match. You lived every single moment. What were your reflections on the event?
What is special for me is I got to interview all the coaches. So understanding the background of what these teams were trying to achieve was really special. And for this age group, yes, performance was important, but the human factor and the player-centered approach to coaching was something that really touched my heart because, at the FIH, that's what we're about in education. But to see it lived out at a World Cup where usually pressure takes that all out the window. So it was really great to have conversations with coaches who were very kind about how their teams and their players as individuals were performing.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke on the Junior World Cup show just briefly about the fact that so many of the teams are in very different stages of development. You've got some like Germany who'd been out and played a Pro League match, and you've got others like Canada who'd pulled in some athletes at the very, very last minute. So they're very different stages. And your point is absolutely right. I think every coach I listened to being interviewed spoke about the learning that had taken place as much as anything else. John, you also would have seen an awful lot of those matches and heard those interviews. What were your thoughts on the World Cup?
I mean, from our point of view, it was a huge success, and a massive thanks to the hosts, to South Africa, who did a brilliant job. Remembering that this was originally organised in December last year, and then obviously had to get postponed because of COVID. And yes, all the teams had to change their programs, and some of them had to change some of their selections because of availability. But the fact is, we got the teams down there, but the host did a brilliant job. And the feedback we've had has been fantastic. Speaking this morning, actually, to some of my team who were down there, they just said that it was the best atmosphere of any event that they've ever been to in terms of between the teams. There was a huge amount of camaraderie. We had some challenges, like there was a few thunderstorms came through, and matches got sort of halted halfway through, and the teams were mixing together even in the middle of a match like that, sort of passing the time, singing songs even, and there was this amazing feeling of camaraderie. So yeah, huge success. Really pleased and thankful to the hosts, as I say. But that will be the first world level event that most of those athletes would have participated in, and that sticks with you forever. It was a long time ago now since I played in my Junior World Cup, but I remember that very, very clearly. And for many of those athletes, they'll go on and they'll be the stars that we'll be talking about for many years to come. And it was great to see, and the level of hockey was really fantastic, and some really good close matches, and at the end of the day, some very deserved winners and medalists.
I mean, Marsha, we spoke about it, but I know you were very, very excited at the level of some of those players and the sort of, what are those teams going to go on to achieve? So I just wondered if you could just sort of recap for us who or what, which teams particularly impressed you?
Yeah, well, I think the teams, the top four were definitely the ones that impressed me the most: the Dutch, Germany, India, England, and of course, I have to mention Argentina because I think that they were sometimes a little bit in that quarterfinal, maybe perhaps unlucky in their draw. But I think that those are teams that definitely stood out, but not forgetting the likes of Zimbabwe that I mentioned in the previous show. It was great to see 2 teams from Africa participate in an event like this, and then also cause a major upset. You know, Zimbabwe's opening game where they beat Canada. I think that is really inspirational stuff. And it's been a really long time that Zimbabwe have on this sort of world stage being able to achieve something and in fact even participate. So I think it's really great to see them up and coming again, and just not just only for Zimbabwe but for Africa as a continent, and it being held on African soil is always just a nice cherry on top. But I think the balance of performance and enjoyment was definitely something that stood out from the Junior World Cup. But I'm really excited to see some of these young players become stars of the future, especially, I think you mentioned the teams, but Germany is one that I am quite keen to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, I did an interview with Marley Wickman, who won goalkeeper of the tournament. I mean, you know, that's a group of players that are just going to grow together. Coach Pholo, I mean, you were on the other side of where you normally are. You weren't on the bench, you were in the commentary box. And I've got to say as well, I thought the commentary was fantastic. What was it like being in the box with Tyrone Jabo Bernard, who I think is a fantastic commentator?
Oh, it was fun. You know, Jabu will keep it fun. Owen Honey was super professional, you know, doing that final. He's been in broadcast for years, and he said, Junior World Cup final. And I'm like, yeah, how amazing for these girls. He's like, no, coach, for us. And that was special that someone who does this as he's 9 to 5 still felt that the occasion was so special. And it was really great. And it gave me a sense of, my goodness, you know, when I sing my national anthem before international, this is what he's feeling right now. So, you know, Marsha spoke about the enjoyment factor between the actual games and participation. You could feel it, Marsh. Between the halves, I would go and interview the coaches, running back towards the commentary box. I'd stand because the crowd was mostly family and friends. And I'd tell the Irish, I'm like, you guys are making great TV. And they're like, yeah. And they'd go into dance and song, and it was really special how much everyone enjoyed it. I think the only thing I think it could have been 2% better is if it was in a stadium of 5,000. Yeah. But otherwise, everything else was so perfect. Talking to these players after the game, and these are young players that, you know, in their club teams, they don't really get to be interviewed after matches, and they're not the superstars all the time in the club teams. You know, chatting to them and saying, congratulations, you're the player of the match. How do you feel? And no words for some of them because of the excitement, and, you know, and all of them were like, the team effort. I'm really very happy that I could stand out in this team. So it was brilliant. It was brilliant chatting to so many players. And again, if I'm in the dugout for one team, you don't get that kind of experience with all the teams.
I love some of the metaphors being used. Was there a little bit of competition amongst the various commentators and who could come out with the best metaphor?
I had one where a good friend of mine asked me to say a phrase. Don't remember it now. You can see on screen the laughing. I recorded myself talking about how slippery a play was, and Marsha and I had a good laugh. So it was fun on, off the field, in the broadcast track, in the commentary booth. And I got to speak a lot with the LOC. And seeing Dr. Batra coming out for the last 2 days, hey, that's special. And I was just telling the commentators how special that is. I'm like, this is really it. Yeah. This is how big this is. When Save came through on, I think 3 days before the end, and he came and we spoke, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what I thought it would be. It is that special. So having so many exec members from the FIH committee coming to watch, coming to hand over awards, it was really great for the players. I think the coaches also felt it towards the end that this is something really special. I've worked with Dave Passmore before, many moons ago, and seeing him in that light, he was my mentor when I was educating, and seeing him now in the hot seat of coaching, it was really an amazing experience for everyone all around.
I mean, it really is the continent of Africa's emergence onto the international scene, isn't it? You know, more tournaments there. We need to move on to Pro League though. We've had quite a lot of matches in the last few days. We had India playing Germany. We then had Argentina taking on the USA, so Argentinian women, and the Argentinian men played France. But if we talk about India first, Marsha, India men, they had an emphatic 3-0 and 3-1 win over Germany. Harmanpreet is top of the goal scoring table with 16 goals. That's 10 ahead of the next person. Abhishek, Jugraj and Mandeep are all in that top scoring table as well. Is this a case of success breeding success in India at the moment? I mean, I'm encapsulating all the Indian teams, the Indian junior women, the Indian women and the Indian men. There seems to be a lot going on right now.
Yeah, I think if we just track back to a lot of the changes that they made in their hockey structures in India, I think it's a huge, sometimes you would think it was quite risky at the time that they were making some of their changes or some of their decisions. We saw a lot of coaches change in the past few years. And I'm talking also in general across men's hockey and women's hockey. But I think that it's been clear that they've always had this long-term vision to bring Indian hockey, starting particularly with the men, going back even further when the Hockey India League was introduced, and then bringing in the focus on the women, and just bringing Indian hockey back into the top ranking, where they traditionally comfortably were. I think that long-term vision is definitely paying off when you look at, if you just track back on some of the decisions that they were making. I think that they definitely used the last 2 years to their advantage with lockdown. And also, let's not forget that culturally, I think that it also allows them to make those decisions where they can bring their hockey group together for longer periods of time. And especially when the whole world is in lockdown and COVID is sort of dictating how we live. I think that they had a massive advantage and they took full advantage of it, in the sense of bringing their groups together. We know that they stayed together for many months, where they could work and just focus on being hockey players, and it's definitely paying off. We know that the coaches have appreciated the more contact that they've had with their players. Yannicka mentioned that as well. And also knowing that, it's because it's not, I think especially for women's hockey in India, it's not just about getting on the field and playing. There's a lot of other cultural dynamics that go into it. And I mean, if we just look at language for one, they speak multiple languages, and having a foreign coach who speaks English and having that ability to communicate, those contact moments, they're now extremely important if you'd want to progress. And I think that compliments to them in seeing a challenge, but finding the solution very quickly and making it work for them. We see it in the results now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, John, you've obviously been watching India's or charting their rise over the past few seasons. What are your thoughts culminating in those 2 victories in against Germany?
I mean, echo what Marsha's just said. They've made some big and bold and brave decisions over the last few years, but a centralized program definitely suits them. It doesn't suit every nation for reasons, all sorts of reasons, cultural, club structures, and for other things. But it clearly suits them. They are clearly performing really, really well. And I agree with you, Sarah. I think success does breed success. And when you start to do well, it's a virtuous circle, isn't it? We've seen that in many countries over the years. I think the big question now for that Indian men's team, they are sitting top of the table by quite some margin. They have played more matches than anyone else. And playing India in India has always been a big challenge. And the question for India has always been, when they're on the road, can they replicate those performances? And they've only got 4 matches left in the league, but those 4 matches are against Belgium and against the Netherlands. Well, they're pretty in Belgium and in the Netherlands, so they are probably the biggest challenges that they could face, understanding, of course, that Australia are not in the league this year. So, on one hand, they are incredibly successful and doing really well. On the other hand, they've probably won the matches that that they should be winning, right? If you look at, they came third in the Olympics, and therefore they should be beating everyone that they have beaten. Now, there's a big difference between should beat and beat, but they have, and that's fantastic, and they've been incredibly impressive. And as you say, it's raining goals over in Bhubaneswar. If they now come to Europe next month and do a job on Belgium and the Netherlands, they win the league, and and rightly so, and they'll have fully deserved that. So those are going to be huge matches and fascinating. And let's touch wood that COVID stays away as we think it hopefully will, and therefore we can have packed houses and big crowds and being really, really entertained by some amazing matches.
Yeah.
May I ask a question, if you don't mind? But John, just on that, when you say like the question to them would be, maintaining this sort of goal scoring fest that they're having at the moment. But also one of the things that is also quite striking for me is that we see their key players have played pretty much all of the games, whereas other nations have used the Pro League, particularly this season, to rotate a lot of their players. And that's what we saw, with Argentina as well. They fielded quite a young team, blooded some youngsters. We saw Germany as well, like goalkeepers with 3 international games playing this weekend. So we saw teams taking some risks and exposing some of their players, whereas India have kept their stability a little bit more. Isn't that also a question maybe to India, is, the group that comes in after that, what's the gap like? Because we haven't really got an opportunity to see it.
Yeah, I think thanks, John. I would think Marsh, having had quite a good run at their own Junior World Cup in November, I think it was, with the men, and the women doing quite well now. They're looking to, there's Commonwealth coming up, World Cup for the women, and the World event for the men much later on. So I think, like John said, success, breeding success, is sometimes you just want to get that one big win on something that you can push that to help you get to the next stage of winning. So sometimes I'll sacrifice new caps for the success of this group, and then the new caps are coming into a winning group, a winning culture, and that just the feeling of being at a national camp and staying together, as we said, might be something of a different experience.
Yeah, and look, I don't, I haven't spoken to Graham specifically about their plans, but from the outside, they're coming to Europe to play 2 of the top teams in the world in the Netherlands and Belgium. They've then got Commonwealth Games, which we know that they're going to be using to blood some of their younger players, because they've then got the Asian Games, which is the qualifier for the Paris Olympics. So that's a high priority event for them in October. And then they're hosting the Men's World Cup in January. So I think this group, I agree with Coach that I think that this group is being kind of prepared to peak in later this year, and then really go for the World Cup. They hosted a fantastic World Cup in 2018 and did well, but I think that's what they're really targeting for this group. And then we know that the next group coming through, I was in Bhubaneswar for the last Junior World Cup in December. That's a strong group as well. So they are blooding some of those younger players, but they're not rotating the squads to the same extent as the European nations. But then, as we talked about earlier, that's for other reasons. And the European leagues are coming to they're really peaking at the moment. So some of the European selections maybe are influenced by those.
This is a very, very nice bridging across to what was happening in Buenos Aires, because France, they are quite clearly a team that are seeking to peak in their own Olympics in Paris in 2024. The first match was a 4-2 win for Argentina, but it was a close match. It was a well fought match, and then they roared back the next day. John, have you been watching France's progress, and what do you think about that? From an objective point of view, for us in our sport, to have a strong host nation in Olympic Games in both genders is what we always want. We always, because that creates local excitement around the games. It means that you ensure you get tickets sold and you get a really good atmosphere for the hockey tournament. So, for us, it's really positive that they are progressing so well.
They've had good performances in their juniors, and now that's starting to come through into the seniors as well. And yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that they are in the top 8, maybe top 6 in the world at the moment now, and definitely on an upward trajectory. So yeah, really positive to see that. They did well when they went down to South Africa. They've clearly learned, improved. As you say, 2 good matches against Argentina, probably about fair result to split them 1 each. And I think they will continue to improve. They've had this sort of fortunate opportunity to join the Pro League for this season because of the situation with Australia and New Zealand. They're clearly making the most of that, which is fantastic. Fred's come in, he's got experience of working with Spain, and so they've got a good coach, good experienced coach. I like the fact that it's a French coach of a French team leading up to a French Olympic Games. It's nice for that country for the coaches in that country to be inspired by a national of their own coaching their team. So yeah, they'll finish their Pro League. Then they've got Nations Cup at the end of this year. They'll build into the World Cup, so they'll be looking to have a good performance in the World Cup in January. And then if they do well, I mean, who knows? They could win the Nations Cup at the end of this year, and then they join the Pro League for the 23-24 season, and that then is the perfect run-in for them into Paris. So yeah, it's looking good. And then we also see that their women are doing well. Not quite at that same level yet, but they're starting to move up the rankings as well, which is again really positive from our point of view to have both genders representing the host nation in Olympic Games in a couple of years' time.
Coach Pholo, I'm going to ask you, Argentina. So we've got France on this upward trajectory, which must be a coach's absolute dream. The French team are obviously learning with every match and every experience. Argentina, they lack consistency at the moment, don't they? That they can put in a good performance, then they can have a shocking performance, and then they can have a good performance again. As a coach, is it all about mind games? How do you get consistency in these players? And I can't have a whole thesis on this, but just your initial thoughts on that.
Yeah, I feel like again, when even watching the junior Argentine women, it's a lot of that passion that needs to be managed. So it's so much energy that they bring onto the field that sometimes it's a challenge for the coach to just manage that in a way that is still constructive. But are we always going to get a firecracker of a game out of Argentina? Of course we can. Of course, every single time they play. And that was my worry for them, especially the Junior World Cup, is coming into this game against Germany. Germany been hurt before. They know what they need to do, having lost that game to India. And we saw a very clinical German performance. It was a steamroller really over Argentina in the first half. And I was like, that's the German precision that we'd expect against a very flared approach to the game from Argentina. And I think that's where they're still getting that right, Argentina. When are we structured? When are we loose? When are we open? When are we go forward without thinking? When are we holding the ball? And that's been, I think, for years. Even when they won in Brazil, yeah, it was, okay, we see you. But it was also those performances. We had to analyze them in a coaching context. And it's very much of they brought in the crash ball as like the number one thing in the final third, and we saw a lot of teams doing that after, but it's always so different with them. So I think that's the challenge, is just managing that, the passion, the excitement, the flair, and how do you merge that with the control and the structure of a game plan.
Which if we look at the women against USA, and actually the women throughout this Pro League, they're probably further along that trajectory, aren't they, towards really, really great performance. Marsha, we saw Delfina was back. Both Granato sisters were on fire. Rocio Sanchez is back firing on all cylinders. What do you make of Argentina women at the moment?
Yeah, I think that they're in top form, but also we need to also give credit where credit's due. They are in form, and they had their key players this weekend, which was really good for them. But at the same time, we see a very young American team. So while USA are at a very different stage in their building at the moment, I think it's almost comparing apples with pears a little bit. with the two teams that we saw come up against each other this last weekend. But I think Argentina showed really, I think they would also be disappointed that they conceded that one goal. Great for America, their first goal of the Pro League, but I think that Argentina would have wanted to show their dominance in both games consistently and not concede that goal. But it's also good for them to have these learning moments as well. It's going to be interesting to see how they go into the next phase, because that is exactly what Pholo is saying, is that the inconsistency that you'd see based on, playing with a lot of passion and a lot of flair. So it'll be interesting, but I think they definitely showed their dominance this weekend and showed why they are definitely at the top of the standings in the world, the rankings in the world.
Yeah, I mean, they are looking very, very good. And you have to feel for the USA, because I think they played really well, but there's just such a lack of experience, isn't it? No caps over 100. I mean, Delphina and Bellum between them have got over 550. So, there's a wide chasm of experience there. We obviously just mentioned Belensuki, and of course, even the greatest players have to hang up their sticks at some point. So I believe this is her last performance on home soil before the World Cup, and then I think we can pretty much expect that she'll be retiring after that. So it's fitting. We're just going to have a quick montage of great saves that were made over the weekend, and Bellum is one of those, along with Kelsey Bing, who had a lot of opportunities to make some great saves, and Krishan Pathak from India as well. So we'll just enjoy those saves.
Zucker once more. Towards out once more. Pathak, excellent save. India kept their second clean sheet yesterday. They can't do so today, but Krishan Pathak with a very good save indeed.
We'll go to Costa yet again. They do. This time it's a better routine, and it's an even better save. What a save from Kelsey Bing. They find an equaliser. Go to the right, Castle takes a touch, little deflection on it. A good save there needed to keep it at 2-1.
Right, so next weekend we see the USA back in action as they host England. A bit like Argentina, England have lacked consistency in recent performances, but there is a lot of experience in that squad. Marsha, how are you going to call it?
Yeah, I think Argentina will come off top again. I think that they're going to want to just continue with the progress that they've been making. Like you said, England have been a little bit inconsistent, but I think that we'll see better performances in comparison to their previous outing.
Yeah, and Coach Pholo, with the USA, the under-21 side, we saw them put in some great PC variations. There was an awful lot of different variations around the top of the circle. Can we expect similar from the senior squad, do you think? Do you think that's something that's going throughout the USA system?
Well, the US have been always known for, their set piece play and how strong they are there, because they will watch 1,000 hours of video on, on one set play. And that's what they've known their whole lives from basketball, from, football. And that's what we see with them now. So it was always interesting when, commentating their games, because their PCs always going to be different. Towards the end, I was like, hope we're not getting bored as viewers, because most teams are just slapping from the top. And I said to Dave in the last Irish game, I was like, Dave, you are making this goalkeeper look incredible. Like, no, we're just missing the tip. So I was like, okay, you're going for the deflection. So it was just half a yard that would have, and I was like, why are they not deflecting the ball? So there were a lot of the same variations over and over for many teams, but the US will always look to move. They don't have the firepower that other teams have.
Yeah.
So they will look for different ways of getting closer to the goalkeeper to then get the goal in.
Brilliant. We're sort of running out of time, so very, very quickly, John, Argentina men versus South Africa men. What can we expect there, do you think?
Well, I think it would be, it's difficult to see beyond an Argentina victory or two there, but I think South Africa improved a lot during their hosting matches over that, when they had that sort of consistent period of a couple of weeks where they played many matches. So I'd like to hope that they would put in, improved performance and really push Argentina. But I think, if you were being asked to predict it, it'd be difficult to go against the rankings.
Dare either of you two go against?
I was going to say, careful there, John. You got two South Africans in this.
Yeah. Are you going to challenge him on that one?
Well, I think it would be interesting to see who Argentina are going to field on the day. We saw France definitely exploit some of the younger players in the Argentinian team. So I think it would be nice to see if they go with a more experienced team, or if they do a little bit of balance between blooding some new players and having the experienced players to bring a little bit of stability. It'll be interesting to see. We know the South Africans have got also quite a young team traveling over to Argentina, some new players that will be making their debut in the Pro League. So that will be quite interesting just to see sort of the balance between the two teams. I will put my head on a chopping block and say I am prepared for a surprise, John.
Love it.
Love it.
Yeah, I just said, that France got that win over Argentina their last game, because I think they would have come at South Africa with even a younger squad. Had they gotten a draw or a W over France. I think now they know that they want the win and need the win. So, like you're saying, must be interesting to see who they play. And yeah, I'm excited to see South Africa play. We've got my favorite player right now, and I think a really massive player for the future for South Africa, Sihle Ngubane in the midfield. Very lanky young man, moves through swiftly between them, and I just love the way he plays. I love his vision. I love his skill set. So I'd love to see him here. And he hasn't traveled with the national senior team. So it'll be great to see him in this environment. And obviously the youngsters that have also traveled with. And again, when we do the show next week, we'll be looking at a lot of South African saves, because we will be there. We will be big. We're going to have a big wall in front of those goals. And like Marsh, be prepared for a surprise.
There you go, John. Back in your box.
It's an impossible question.
I'll give you the floor for the last bit, John. We're expecting a slightly different structure to the fixtures next year in season 4. Do you want to just explain what's happening and why it's happening?
Yeah, and I'll try and be brief, although it's one of those subjects you could talk for a long time on. But we took the opportunity of the kind of pause in hockey that COVID enforced on us all to really have a look at the structure of the Pro League, and to talk to all of the stakeholders, all of the national associations who are involved, and look at what had gone well in those first couple of seasons and what could potentially be improved. And I think, it came back loud and clear that COVID has caused a lot of challenge, as it has for everyone around the world, but for national associations around their budgets and their commercials. And so was there a way of being a bit more efficient with traveling to a location and maybe playing a few more matches in that location? There's also obviously a benefit then of less air miles and more sustainable solutions. And then from a sort of domestic league point of view, it means that the players will be away for less time because matches are going to be more condensed. So the long and short of it is where we've got to is rather than having 2 nations getting together each time to play their matches, we're actually going to bring 3 nations together on each occasion, and then those 3 nations will play all of their matches against each other. So in one location and in one gender, you'll have 6 matches, which could be on 6 consecutive days, or they could be over 2 consecutive weekends. If you've got both genders together, then you've got 12 matches over those 6 days, and therefore you can make it work so that you have one of the host nations gender teams playing on every one of those 6 days, which obviously helps from a ticketing point of view. So we maintain that kind of home hosting aspect of Pro League, where we've always got good crowds because one of the home nations are always playing. So the maths of that means that we're going to be organising 14 mini 3-nation tournaments next season, and you compare that to what we've done this season, and we'll organise 44 2-nation little mini tournaments, if you like. So in terms of, again, sort of efficiencies and the economics of the whole thing, every time we set up a venue at the moment, we set it up for 2 or 4 matches, and then we move to a different venue and we do another setup, and each of those setups, there's branding, there's temporary seating, there's TV cameras, there's a whole load of setup that goes on. There's officials need to be flown in. whereas next season we'll only have to do that on 14 occasions and in 14 different places rather than 44. So for a whole host of reasons, it makes a lot more sense, and it's a format that we think will then stick with us for many future years of Pro League. One of the downsides is that not every nation will therefore host every year. But the opportunity is there for each season. We'll look at who are the 6 nations who can host, or 6 or 7 nations who can host. Ideally, that would be to host both genders for the reasons I mentioned earlier. But in some cases, we will have just a single gender set of matches being hosted. It also, as I say, means that the domestic leagues have more time, and the athletes can sort of really plan their years, their seasons, based on when they're with the national team, when they're with their club teams, and when they have rest periods as well.
We're wrapping up, but I'm imagining both as a coach and as a player, Marsha, that would appeal to both of you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It definitely protects the welfare of the athletes. I think we've seen them take a lot of strain, just not physically, but also emotionally, I think, having to travel for extensive periods of time. So I think that this new setup is a lot more suited to protecting the well-being of athletes.
And your thoughts on that as well, Coach Pholo?
I think it's perfect in terms of talking about your domestic leagues, how long and how often am I away from my team, and in areas where, like here in South Africa, most of our players are students. How long are you away from studies? How long are you away from the university that's paying for your studies? And if you look at in Europe, some players can't avail themselves to the national team because they've got really massive club competitions. But this way, John, really well done. It's always great that the FIH are always thinking about how do we make this better. I haven't seen us rest on one thing for 3 or 4 years and say, listen, this is how we decided in 1922. We're going to keep at it. We're always looking to innovate and make things easier, not just for the coaches or the association, federation. It's always for the players. And I think that we will have better longevity of players if we look after them the way we keep looking after them.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a great note to end on. We're going to end the show with one of the moments of the weekend, which was the France victory over Argentina. But I'd just like to thank all of you for your input today and sharing your wisdom and words, etc., etc. And we'll see whose prediction comes true for next weekend. But thank you all very much indeed.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marsha. Thanks, Bobby.
Go to Lockwood. Lockwood, oh, a really clever move, and France have their second. Scored by the injector Charles Masson. An ingenious little play, and it puts France 2-0 up just inside the last 10 minutes. So clever and so effective. Nobody really was expecting that. So France get their revenge after that 4-2 loss yesterday. A full-time score here in Buenos Aires. Argentina 0, France 2.
Check it out.